Good morning, thought leaders. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're really happy you're here with us on this beautiful Tuesday morning in September in Greater Cleveland. We've had a great summer here, and let's hope it continues for another couple of months or a month and a half. Before we get started, once again, I'm Ralph Dice. I'm president of Dice & Company, and our Senior Executive Thought Leader Forum was created about 14 years ago to bring people from different industries, different organizations who are leaders, who are in HR and CEOs and COOs, and come together and learn primarily about leadership and human capital issues. And as our program evolved, we got to know some key leaders in town, and we've been very fortunate to bring them to thought leaders and get them to share their insights about leadership. Today, we're very fortunate to have Jay Gershen here. Jay is the president of NeoMed, which is the Northeast Ohio Medical University. It is a really, really cool institution that most people know nothing about. And that's why I'm so grateful that Jay is able to join us, because I want people to know about this wonderful institution. But I also want people to know about Jay's leadership style and his vision and some of the wonderful things he's done with this institution. Jay shared with me that he was in the Leadership Cleveland class of 2016, and he was the oldest member of that class. And the class can vary. There are frequently people in their early 30s in those classes. And actually, when I was in my early 50s, I thought I was the oldest person in that class. But Jay holds the record so far, I guess.
Early 90s.
There was someone in their 90s?
That was me.
Oh, okay. So we're going to have a conversation, Jay and I, and we're going to ask you to feel free to join in. And I'm going to begin by asking you to welcome Jay to our thought leaders this morning. So Jay is both a dentist and a PhD, and he runs a medical university. Jay, how did a dentist become the president of a medical university?
Thank you, Ralph. Before I get into that, let me just tell you how honored I am to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. I also wanted to recognize two staff people from NeoMed that really do a phenomenal job, one of whom you found for us, Rod Ingram, the head of our public relations and marketing, and his boss, Daniel Blaine, vice president for advancement and head of our foundation.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for providing leadership to NeoMed. Yeah.
Thank you, yeah. And you're very welcome.
So that's a question I'm asked frequently, actually. There is one other dentist in the country who's a university president, Eli Capilouto, who is the president of the University of Kentucky, actually. But I think both of us came to the positions in kind of anecdotal ways. I can tell you my story. I was at UCLA for about 23 years, and in the last couple of years I had the pleasure of serving as dean of the College of Dentistry. And when I was leaving the position, going back to the faculty, I thought, there was a notice on my desk in the dean's office that was actually a job notice, and they said, wanted Executive Vice Chancellor, University of Colorado Health Sciences Center. And I kept reading through it, and it said, MDs preferred, not required. And then on the top, there was a little handwritten note. It said, do you like to ski? So, I said, first of all, I never skied in my life. I don't like sliding, so. I took the notice home and showed it to my family, and my daughter says, hey, Dad, you ought to try that out. Colorado might be great. We'll live in L.A. And I said, they're not going to take me. I'm a dentist. So they want a physician, obviously, for this position. So back and forth, but they wrote that note. They must really want you. Do you like to ski? So one thing led to another. I applied for the job. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my faculty office. I'm out of the dean's office, and I'm sitting in my faculty office. And my assistant from the dean's office comes by, who I'd worked with for a number of years. And she says, Jay, are you really going to leave? We hear it's down to 2 people, and you're one of the finalists for this job. So I said, Barbara, you know, it's really amazing. I just did it as a lark, and all of a sudden I'm a finalist. And I said, you know, I never really thought of applying for that job. And as a matter of fact, if they didn't write that note on this, you know, advertisement, I never would have done it. And she looked at me and she says, what do you mean I wrote that note? And that's the honest story how a dentist got involved in medical education. There's no other connections.
Your assistant. That is so great. So how does one, most of us here are not from the academic world, how does one go from being a professor to being a dean? You know, what are the skills that one has to learn in order to be a leader of an academic department?
Yeah. Well, you know, an academic department is one thing. University is another thing. They say, you know, what's the difference between a dean and a president? And the answer is a dean writes his own speeches, you know. It's it's an interesting, academia is an interesting world. Obviously, people have different expertise. I had a great opportunity about 7 years into my UCLA time and was offered a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellowship and spent a year in Washington working on the Energy and Commerce Committee. The chair at that time was John Dingell from Michigan, and I functioned as a health staffer. And the purpose of the fellowship was to provide university people, health professions people around the country experience in governmental affairs so they can come back to the university and provide that experience to the university. So that was one thing that really kind of changed my perspective from a content point of view, because by doing that, I learned that the world was larger than dentistry, that healthcare was larger than dentistry, and I learned that how the Congress functioned, how policy is made, how research becomes policy, and how the levers of government work. Probably more importantly, I found a mentor there, and his name was Mr. Lewis Stokes. And he was on the Appropriations Committee, as you know, and he took to the fellows and offered us the opportunity to come and see him from time to time to get advice. And so, you know, one of my first non-academic mentors, I had a number of academic mentors, but this was a non-academic mentor. And when I think about what that led to, because when I came back to UCLA, I spent a lot of years lobbying Mr. Stokes for education and research funds, and was a you know, a person who visited his office frequently. But then I was offered the actually I went to Colorado, and in Colorado we wound up on several committees and boards, national boards together, because he left the Congress. He had been there for 30 years and left the Congress. And so about 7 years ago, I called Lou up and I said, hey Lou, you never guess what? I'm coming to Northeast Ohio. And he said, just, you know, those of you who know Mr. Stokes, oh, Jay, that's great. You're going to go work at the Cleveland Clinic, you know? And I said, no. I said, no.
No.
He said, oh, you're going to University Hospital. It's going to be with Case. That's great. Congratulations. I said, no, Lou, I don't know that either. He said, well, what are you going to do? You know? So I said, I'm going to Neo-UCOM, which was the name of our institution back then, Northeastern Ohio University's Colleges of Medicine, Pharmacy, and Graduate Studies.
Great branding, huh, Jay?
Which, by the way, served the university well for many years. But as you started adding colleges, the name got longer and longer. And he says, I never heard of that. And I realized that I had a challenge because although the college had graduated several thousand physicians and really had done a wonderful job in providing primary care practitioners for Northeast Ohio, most people hadn't heard of it. And if Congressman Stokes hadn't heard of it, then I was in big trouble because he's a native, he knows the area and so forth. So yeah. He said he was going to help us, and then from that point began to help us with some of the programs I'll get into later. But so mentorship is really important, and some of these transitions, becoming prepared for positions a lot of time is meeting the right people and and having those people assist you with what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
Why don't you give us an overview of Neomed, its founding and the various schools that it has, and some of the really interesting things about the school.
So in 1973, there were 3 universities who wanted to have their own medical school. Kent State University, University of Akron, and Youngstown State University. And the state said it's ridiculous. Well, we can't have 3 more medical schools. It's too many. But it would be good to have 1 more medical school in the state. And they came up with a compromise version, which was to have a college, a medical college, which was connected to 3 universities. So there was legislation which actually forms Neo-UCOM at that time as Northeastern Ohio Universities plural, College of Medicine. It was a College of Medicine of 3 universities. About a year or 2 before I came here, the legislation was changed again, and Cleveland State University was added to the mix. And the idea was, through a study commission that was done, they said, well, wait a second, it's Northeastern Ohio, but how do you not have Cleveland in Northeastern Ohio? It's the largest city in the region. So that was added. And the second thing that was done was that they felt that the board should be a gubernatorial board, appointed board, and that it should have the same status as the other 13 4-year public universities. So that commission created an independent board that was appointed by the governor, and then moved also the university to Cleveland. And when I was hired, my predecessor was both the president of the university and the dean of the College of Medicine. And they split the position, the board split the position, hired myself, and I hired a dean of medicine. We later added a pharmacy college and a graduate school. So now we're not the college of 3 universities, but we're an independent university with 3 colleges. Okay? And it's a very important distinction because even though we're relatively small, it puts us at 2 very important tables. One table is the 4-year public institutions, and I sit with my colleagues every other month at the Inter-University Council, which represents Ohio State, Toledo, Cincinnati, all the regional ones here. And then it also puts us at the table of the academic health centers. So there are 7 academic health centers in the state, 1 private, of course, the case, 6 public, and there are 130 academic health centers in the country. So by being at those 2 tables, we're able to leverage opportunities and move the university forward. Yeah.
Now, just to go down a side here, you do have a mascot at Neomed, don't you?
I do, yeah.
I mean, how many universities have a mascot but no football team? How do you explain that one, Jay?
Well, the mascot is Nate the Walking Whale. And it was actually founded because one of our faculty a number of years ago in Pakistan found the skeleton of to prove that whales used to walk on Earth before they swam in the ocean. And the skeleton sits in our rotunda. The students finally said that, we need a mascot too. We never lost a game. We wanted to be the walking whale. So I'll tell you a cute story about this. When I first came here, Gordon Gee actually invited me to his house. And of course, Gordon Gee was president of Ohio State twice, and president of 3 or 4 other universities along the way. He's now at West Virginia.
Yes.
And I knew Gordon because he was at the University of Colorado.
He was.
About 10 years before I got there.
I see, yeah.
And we were actually in the same building, but not at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gordon said, hey, look, Jay, I'd like to welcome you to Ohio, which was very nice of him. He says, you can bring 100 people to my house. So we brought donors, and we brought legislators, and we brought all kinds of influential people to the house. It was just a wonderful opportunity in Columbus. And at the end of the reception, he gets at the microphone, he says, we now want to give you an Ohio State jacket. And I said, fantastic. He takes the jacket out of the box and puts it on. I still have it. It's a wonderful jacket, football jacket, And he didn't know that we did some research ahead of time. My staff is very clever, and they found out this was going to happen, so we needed to give him something. So, so he about to close the ceremony. I said, one second, Gordon, I have something to say also. So I took the microphone and talked for a while, and I said, and I have a present for you. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to the NCAA the other day and found out that our football team is going to scrimmage yours in the fall. So I said, open the package, you'll see. So he opens the package up, and we have a wonderful sweatshirt with Nate the walking whale on the front, and gave it to him as a gift. So it's a long way of saying that's about our mascot.
Yeah. I was hoping Rod would bring Nate with him this morning, but I guess you have to put in a special request. Before we get more into leadership, one of the things when Susan and I visited your campus, we were just really taken by the STEM school that you have there, and it's really a wonderful story. Jay, would you tell us about the STEM school, please?
I'd be happy to, Ralph. So I'm sitting in my office about 5 years ago, and there's a woman on my calendar that I had not met before. And I went out to my assistant, I said, who is this person? She said, well, she's a biology teacher across the street at Rootstown High School. And I said, okay, I didn't know what her agenda was. She came in and she says, President Gershen, I've been thinking about this a long time, but I would like to partner with you and start a STEM high school. So I said, are you representing Rootstown, public schools? And she says, no. I said, what are you doing? Oh, I'm a biology teacher there. Well, who are you representing? I'm representing myself. I said, well, okay, how many of these have you done? None. I started laughing. I said, so you're coming in here and you want to start a STEM school. And, how do I know this is a real thing? So she started talking, and about a half hour later, I brought some more staff in. And before you know, we're sitting around with about 7 people for a couple hours talking with her, Stephanie Limeline. She's a wonderful lady. So she designed the space, designed the curriculum. She hired all the faculty. It's the first rural STEM high school in Ohio, and the only STEM high school in the entire country on a medical university campus. It is a lottery school, so we're not taking the top 10% of kids. It's a lottery school. We have geniuses, we have kids who have learning disabilities. In the standardized testing last year, they scored, I think, 6th in Northeast Ohio, 13th out of 800 or so high schools in the state, and came in first of all the STEM high schools in the state. How'd they do it? Well, they did it because we have a public-private partnership on our campus, whereby we've built some facilities. We can talk about that later. Part of that is built specifically for the STEM high school, and we're subsidizing much of the rent for the high school. So the school is able to use the dollars they would normally spend on rent for hiring outstanding teachers and embellishing the curriculum and so forth. This is the students are working teams. It's self-generative learning. You can't get a C, you have to get an A or a B, or you take the test again and you get tutoring and mentoring. Stephanie has been at the White House with some other leaders to talk about this as a model STEM high school for the country. And it is a public school. It's its own school district. So we get state stipends for each student. And I'm just really proud of it. It's a very exciting program. We graduated the first class in May, 44 kids. We have a total of 100 in the class, so we have about 360 kids in the school now, but the first class is a small one. All 44 are going on to either 4-year college, 2-year community college, or technical school. And every one of them got their first choice. Okay.
That's wonderful.
So really a great story, and it shows, as far as leadership is concerned, how a person can make a difference. As a matter of fact, the biggest concern that we have about the school is if Stephanie ever decides to leave, how do we replace her? Yeah. Because she's so incredibly talented.
So how is it that you were open to Stephanie's proposal?
That's a great question. I've kind of seen a lot of leaders come and go in my life. Actually, this month I'm celebrating my 40th year in academia.
Wow! Congratulations,
thank you.
Doctor.
I made it. And but I think a lot of this has to do with with leadership, what leadership is, and how you define leadership, and what really makes an institution or an organization tick. And I really believe that, you heard that you got to surround yourself with smart people. Yeah, of course you do. But then you can't just surround yourself with them. You have to make sure that you support them. So it starts with supporting your leadership team. I think all the talent that's out there needs to be leveraged in a way that can really kind of express what each person's contribution can be. I really think that it's about leading from the back of the room as well as the front of the room. You've got to push people to be up front, to do the things they do well as expressing the vision of the institution. So I saw that in Stephanie. I mean, I saw that she was somebody that really had a dream, had a passion, had talent, and was really a potential leader. I wanted to give her the opportunity to do that. Sometimes you do that and you lose. You make it, go on, try another one. I think the biggest mistake that many of us make sometimes is that we keep talking to ourselves. We're in the same meetings with the same people, talking about the same things, recommending the same people for the same boards, and we're not really going outside the boundaries to try and expand the thinking. One of the things at Leadership Cleveland, and you had the same experience, I'm sure, Ralph. So I just did it this year, and at 70 years old, I think I was the oldest person there, and most of the people were in their 50s and 60s. I would say 40s, 50s, and 60s. I would say half of them were CEOs or leaders of organizations or institutions, and the other half were mid-level leaders.
Yes.
And I thought it was the greatest thing going because I had an opportunity to be with young people, younger people, learning how they think. And I don't mean in age, I'm talking about in terms of experience on the job. And it's amazing all the bottled up talent that we ignore because you have to pay your dues 30 years before you can be on a board. It's ridiculous. I mean, we had people sit as 63 classmates, and every one of them could have done almost anything.
Yeah.
So I think we have to go beyond the comfortable and go beyond our friends and go beyond go beyond that and really begin to look for talent and develop a pipeline.
Well, that reminds me of a story at Dyson Company. Several years ago, we had an intern from John Carroll University, and he had an earring in each ear. And every time I would look at that kid, I wanted to scream, but I said, no, this is really good for me because I need to hear what this kid has to say. And it was a simple thing. It was a symbol. It was symbolic, yet it forced me to constantly realign my open-mindedness, which as you age, it's easy for that open-mindedness to narrow.
Yeah. Well, this Thought Leaders program you have here is wonderful from the point of view of trying to have that conversation. I was mentioning before that I came back last week. I was in a Thought Leaders meeting in Washington, D.C. for a group called Research America, which represents about 125 million Americans trying to push medical research on the public agenda and funding, which obviously is very important for health and also for the economy in terms of jobs and in terms of health status. And so the board's about 35 people, and every year we have a Thought Leaders meeting, and in that meeting we invite 35 people from the outside to join the board for 2 days, and it's phenomenal. And these are movers and shakers in all kinds of industries and people who are not the usual suspects. And it's amazing what comes out of that, and it's amazing how that drives the board agenda. The meeting was one day, and the board meeting was the next day.
Yeah.
And we're able to really pull from that. So, going outside the boundaries is really important.
Under your leadership, the campus at NeoMed has changed dramatically. And most of us, if you're employed by NeoMed, do not raise your hand, okay? But let me see the hands of people who have actually been to Rootstown. Well, there's more than I would have thought. So Rootstown is to a certain extent isolated, and people don't think about Rootstown very frequently, but you've created this really wonderful campus there. Could you talk to us about how you brought about that transformation?
So, yeah, I'm the president, but I would say we created the campus, and part of the reason it's there is because we created it. And it starts again with an extraordinary leadership team. It starts with an extraordinary faculty, an extraordinary staff, very talented people. You know, here we are, as I mentioned, expanding into Cleveland. And all of a sudden, we have more students, 140 more medical students. And we're wondering, gee, where we're going to put those people. We didn't have enough classrooms, and we didn't have enough lecture rooms and so forth. So I went to the state and needed $5 or $6 million to do that, and the state said, we don't have the money. And I was told that OU had $1 billion of deferred maintenance, and Cincinnati has $750 million in deferred maintenance, and we just don't, you know, $6 million for classrooms doesn't cut it right now. We have other priorities. So I went back to my team. I said, well, we have a choice. We can sit in line for about 30 years, which we calculated that's what it would be, or we could do something special. And so we have a very talented person on our team, John Ray, who's vice president for administration and finance, and he came up with this incredible, with consultants, came up with an incredible scheme to plan to seemed like a scheme at the time, but a plan to double the size of the campus. And so we've added 500,000 square feet to the campus. So it was 500,000, and now it's 1 million square feet. The cost was $166 million, and there's not one penny of state capital money in the plan. So I'll say again, not one penny of state capital money. It's all done by public-private partnership. What we did, we put a bid out to contractors, and we had 17 bids, and we decided that Tony Manna and Signet was the right company, and they came in, and we leased the land to Tony and his company. They built the facilities. We backed the bonds. We put our name out front, and then we subleased back the facilities that we needed. So, so you drive by and you see this big place, and you say, "My God, look what happened there! Where'd they get the money for that?" Well, the way it's being paid for is that inside the facility there is a health and wellness center with 2,500 members. 2,500 members. There's only 4,000 people in Rootstown. Okay. So remember, it's a 45-minute drive from 4 million people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a STEM high school with 360 kids. We have conference facilities. We're now competing with Landerhaven and others for weddings and all kinds of things.
Wow.
Professional meetings, retreats. We've become caterers, you know, in higher
Yes.
education.
Yes.
We have a ready zone that starts up companies. We have 20 companies, 8 on the site, startup companies. We have a pharmacy. Richmond has a pharmacy of the future where pharmacists actually interact with patients on medication management, and the technicians fill the prescriptions in the back. So, you know, you sit in a pharmacy and you try and get their attention, and you can't get their attention because they're going like this, and you don't know, and the clerk has no idea what's going on. Well, you're greeted by a pharmacist who sits down with you and says, "Let's put your medications out, and let's take a look and let's see what's going on here. Which doctors do you have? Are you taking the right stuff? Are you taking it at the right time? Maybe you need a different drug. Let's stop taking those drugs." So we're really getting the pharmacist practicing to the top of the license.
Yes.
In terms of that. And then, so if I'm a taxpayer, and I look at this thing and I say, well, gee, I know NeoMed, they put physicians out there. That's great. They put pharmacists out there. They do research, and we'll probably get to that. That's nice. You know, we expect universities to do that. But what's in it for me as a Jewish citizen? What do I get out of this thing? Well, I'll tell you. You walk in there, and you can work out. You can get your prescription filled. You can see a primary care doc. Suma's on the campus. I didn't mention that. You can start a company. You can have your daughter's wedding there. You can send your kid there to high school. And all of a sudden you say, you know, hey, NeoMed is doing something for me as a citizen, And my tax dollars are going to something that's important. So as a result of this, if you multiply all those people that I mentioned that are on the campus, the kids, the members of the health and wellness, the people who use the facilities, we're talking about tens of thousands of constituents. So what's happened, this gentleman over here has gone from $1 or $2 million a year to $10 million a year in fundraising. Okay? Our relationships with the Congress and with the state legislature are superb because they love the value of what's going on here.
Yeah.
We've taken down the ivory tower, we've taken down the silos, and we've made this the public's medical university. You can come in and walk in. It's not some mysterious thing where you drive by and say, I wonder what they're doing behind those walls. You know, you can actually walk in and participate. So, and the themes, you know, we have health and wellness programs that help the public with obesity and other issues. So there are things that are useful to the public. It's not just you know, putting anything in there. It's something that's useful.
So this sounds to me as though it's a cutting-edge transformation of the way that medical education is being done.
You know, it's a transformation and it's a different model. There's always a place for Ohio State and Case and you know, a place like UCLA, Colorado, all these other places, Michigan. These are great institutions and they do wonderful things. But our focus is a little different. We only do a few things and we do them well. We're not all things to all people. So this is a university model that, for example, in our research, when I was at Colorado, we must have had 200 research areas at least. And I think it was about $500 million of research with 4 campuses, $500 million. And half of them had outstanding scientists that regardless of the level of the NIH, they would have gotten funded because they were just the best in the country. Okay. The other half were really good, but they weren't the best. So what happens is when the funding goes down at NIH, the best always get the funding and the good don't. So what happens is the university is left with space that's not being funded, tenured faculty that can't be paid. So you have these large universities, particularly on the public side, that are not being efficient in unusable space. So we have 5 areas of research, and we're filled to the brim. We've recruited faculty from all over the country. I would venture to say that we have nationally, internationally renowned faculty, and in the science areas that we do, we can compete with anybody. If you look on the NIH charts, National Institutes of Health, they'll say, where's NeoMed? And we're down at 112. Oh, they can't be very good. They're 112 in terms of total funding. That's the wrong metric. You take a look at the productivity per faculty member, and we're near the top. Okay? Because we have this incredible culture of interprofessional, interdisciplinary work. We have people coming from all over the country for this. So we have people from Hopkins, people have come from Rutgers, from the clinic. We've had people from Temple University, South Florida University, and they all come into my office and say the same thing. Because I meet with all of them as they come. So why would you leave Philadelphia, Baltimore, St. Louis, and these other great cities to come to Rootstown? And they always start off and say, well, first of all, it's nice to be in your office. I didn't even know who the president was in my university. Okay? And I was one of 200 things, and nobody really paid attention to me. Here, I'm one of 5 things, and everybody knows exactly what I'm doing, and I can really express it, and I'm doing great. Okay? Plus the lifestyle being in the Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Akron area, as far as living, the cost of living, all the things everybody knows about in this room. So sometimes we undersell ourselves as a region. I've noticed that coming in as an outsider, that sometimes people are down on the region, when in reality, this region is unbelievable. And I think it's time to the glass has to be half full in order to make things work. You have to have the perception. Reality follows the perception.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yet, how did you come to the decision to tightly focus the research side?
Faculty did that.
They did.
Faculty did that. Before I came, they had 2 areas. As I was coming, they had 3, and since I've been there, they added 2 more. We're not going to add any more. I think 5 is about enough. Otherwise, we're going to become big like everybody else.
Yeah. What are those 5 areas of research?
So one is auditory neurosciences, and we look at hearing disorders, particularly tinnitus in the ears. Many of these, by the way, coincide with aging as a theme. The other one we have is cardiovascular and metabolic diseases. So we have scientists working on stem cell therapy to replace coronary arteries. And so if they're successful, and they're doing this in mice already, in rats, if they're successful in humans, we won't need interventional cardiologists anymore, because you just have an injection and will regrow vasculature.
Yes.
Third one is neurodegenerative diseases, such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Some outstanding people we've just recruited in that area. We also have community mental health. So the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation has funded us for about $13 million over time. And we probably have the most effective public psychiatry program in the country in terms of our group going out and having early detection of schizophrenia and getting people to care. They go out to police departments, companies, universities, and train the staff on how to destigmatize mental illness. We have a program, for example, from the state, which is now going out to all the public universities in the state for suicide prevention, which is a big problem on our university campuses around the state. So that's the fourth one. And the fifth one is, what I forget? Musculoskeletal, thank you. And arthritis, bone growth. Well, we have a scientist came from Temple who's growing bone, and he's now doing it in sheep. They're starting some human trials. So he's claiming that basically you can fix a defect in 3 weeks instead of 8 weeks. So think about the practical, assuming he continues on in a successful way. And actually there's a scientist in the clinic who he partnered with to do some of this. I
think our quarterback needs that right now.
Right, exactly. We get down to, I'm not sure anything's going to help him there.
No, I think you're right. I'm sorry to have interrupted you with that aside, but I
Those
couldn't help myself.
Those are the 5 areas.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to open up to to everybody here, our guests, to ask questions. As voters and taxpayers, what's the message that you want to send to us relative to NeoMed?
Okay, so, we've done a real good job in this country. When you think about the extraordinary medical education establishment that's been set up in all the great universities, 130, actually including the osteopaths, 150 medical schools. And we've done a very good job in the technology of healthcare. We have 2 of the best programs right here in this city. But when you look at and if you look at where those providers that are trained go, after they finish their residencies, not all of them, but most of them go to well-to-do neighborhoods. And we need to continue doing that. Well-to-do people deserve good health care. But we haven't done a very good job in this country in incentivizing providers to go into underserved communities, both urban and rural. So the message that I'd like to put out there is that our programs are doing that. We're focusing on both. We have something called Education for Service, which is a program in which we're raising scholarship dollars, and in exchange for those dollars, year for year, students will practice when they graduate in an underserved community. So, for example, Mercy Health pays the entire $55,000 a year for each medical student. And then when they finish their residency, they'll be going to practice in Mercy Health facilities. Medical Mutual of Ohio provides 60% of the training for the pharmacy, of the tuition for the pharmacy students, and when they finish, they're going to practice in underserved communities. We have companies doing that. Forest City from Cleveland is sponsoring scholarships. We have foundations, individuals. So the program is one in which we're really bringing about the whole idea of national service. And I just listened to Meet the Press on Sunday, and they started talking about, why don't these candidates start talking about something useful instead of bashing each other? And somebody said, well, what's something useful? And the person said, why don't they talk about national service? Well, that's what education for service is. And that, don't just give money to students and say, go take care of yourself, get an education, and then see you. We're going to help you get an education, but then you got to give back to the community. Okay, that's what NeoMed is focusing on in our program, our educational programs. The other thing, with regard to the Cleveland part of this thing, we have a wonderful campus here now at Cleveland State University. We have, there's two universities that have come together and interprofessionally brought their pharmacy and medicine and public health from NeoMed and brought nursing and other health professionals, social work from Cleveland State for a team approach to healthcare training. The clinic is going to be doing this with their new facilities, which is just wonderful to think about. Don't train practitioners in silos, train them in teams, because that's what it's like in real life. Mm-hmm. So we're really focused on team training. We're focused on diversity, because our programs attract very diverse students. Congressman Stokes, I'm very proud to say I'll be going to the Congressional Black Caucus meeting on Friday in Washington. His autobiography is coming out on Friday, actually. It's a signing ceremony, and in the last chapter of his autobiography, which I had an opportunity to look at, there is a mention of the Cleveland State NeoMed partnership, and how important it was for him to get kids from the community, be educated in the community, then go back to Cleveland to practice. That was his whole thing. And so we've taken on that theme in many ways. We've taken on the theme of team training. And we've also taken on, I think the other thing that I think I'd like you to know is that the model of higher education that NeoMed has is very different than others. Not necessarily better or worse, it's just different. And the way it's different is, aside from how the students are taught, is the financial model. So if you look at the other 130 academic health centers in the country, I mentioned them before, you're going to be looking at $1, $2, $3, $4 billion budgets for the medical college and the hospital. We don't own a hospital. We affiliate with 24. Okay, and as a result of that, we have 2,300 clinical faculty who have NeoMed faculty appointments that are not paid by NeoMed. They're paid by the hospitals that we affiliate with. So this is a community giving back, allowing their physicians to be part of this medical school. Our budget is $70 million, not 1, 2, 3, or 4 billion. So from the taxpayer point of view, and the legislators love this, we're an incredible bargain for what we do. Now, we're very focused on our mission. You need large places too. You need the clinic, you need case and the rest of it. I'm not saying, but it is a different model. And I see more of these niche, smaller universities with focused missions becoming much more popular as larger institutions begin to struggle with a decline of public funding. And you can't keep raising tuition. You're out of the market. It's not fair to the students. You've all heard about all the student indebtedness. So that's the model, and that's the message that we're trying to get out there.
Thank you, Jay. So who has a question? Yes, David.
Thank you for the terrific presentation. And I was soothed by your voice. So maybe you should have moved from the mouth to the head. You'd be a good psychiatrist. Very soothing. But I really want to challenge you a little bit, or ask you a challenging question about the notion of all the cutting edge things you're doing and the research and the advancement of healthcare in such a way that we extend life and make things better. Parkinson's and heart disease and cancer are not universal, but dying is. So my question is, to what extent or how has NeoMed incorporated hospice and palliative medicine into its array, into its menu? University of Colorado has Dr. Gene Kuttner, who has the population-based palliative care research center, and other universities have similar people who are champions. But I don't know what you have and what you can comment on.
That's a great question. And as you know, 80% of the healthcare costs are in the last 6 months of life. There's a great book out called, actually it's been out for 40 years, Who Shall Live by Victor Fuchs. And it talks about how do you ration health care? And the reality is that we do ration health care in this country, even though we don't admit it. We ration it based on the ability to pay. If you have good insurance, you get better health care than if you don't have good insurance. As simple as that. But we have a very strong hospice program in terms of on the educational side. Remember, we're not providers. We don't provide services. Our partners do. But on the educational side, we have a very strong geriatrics and hospice program. And you're right. It's very important to look at end of life, look at decision making, the psychology. If you look at your own family member, you'll do anything to save your mother's life or your son's life or whatever. But if you look at it from a population point of view, can we afford for everybody to do anything? And those are difficult philosophical and ethical questions that I'm not prepared to answer here, but we do debate those all the time. Thank you. It's a great question here.
Bill?
I noticed that Neomed is hosting a seminar later this month with some professionals in regards to population health. Can you talk about Neomed's role and explain what population health means to you?
Well, population health is very important. Instead of, in addition to just looking at the health of an individual and how you treat the ailments and problems and concerns of an individual, how you treat a population impacts everybody. And the resources you put into that, the expenditure, how you distribute those resources, which includes technology as well as workforce. So, and as everybody probably knows, with the Affordable Care Act, there's much more of a focus on population health, trying to change the incentive so that it's more directed toward having a wellness population rather than individual procedures on individuals. So that's something that's very important, and I think that, I'm glad you brought it up. I think that one of the, on the provider side, one of the things that the ACA doesn't do, there's a lot of things it doesn't do, and I think probably if we would create it from scratch, we wouldn't create what we have right now. But one of the things it definitely doesn't do is deal with providers. So it's an insurance. It talks about how you get more people to get insurance and coverage, which is one part of it. The other part of it is that how do you make sure there are enough physicians and pharmacists and nurses and the right mix of people and the right professionals and in a team to treat populations of patients. Because what we have now is, as more people come in the healthcare system, we're going to have longer lines waiting for appointments, because we really haven't planned in any national way for the workforce. So we kind of do it on supply and demand, and how many clerkships are available in hospitals, and you fill them up and then you can't do anymore because there's no more. We really haven't done a national planning on what workforce you need to make sure that everybody has the right care if they all have insurance. And maybe that's the next step. We'll see what happens with this election.
One last question. Yes, Tom.
First of all, congratulations. I think what's happening down in Ridgetown is absolutely amazing. Every time I go down there, it's a boost in the arm. How effective as a leader was it for you to come into an institution that was agile, that was below the radar screen, that you were able to sort of form as opposed to a major organization which turns at the speed of aircraft? You seem to be able to be very agile, make decisions. How did that play into your leadership style? Was that an aid to being in a place that's sort of off the radar screen for a while?
Wow. How much time do we have?
Go ahead.
So maybe a little bit of history, then I'll try and answer your question. So I came from the University of Colorado. Those of you who know the program there, it's an extraordinary program. They took a military base and converted it into an academic health center. And this was a square mile Fitzsimmons Medical Army Garrison, which is and was the largest medical development project in the country. $6 billion, 6 million square feet, 3 hospitals, 6 health professional schools, 1 million square feet of research, and a research park that Forest City is involved with. And I watched 3 leaders go through. I worked for 3 leaders that went through there. I was the executive vice chancellor, and I worked for 3 chancellors. The first chancellor was an incredible visionary, extraordinary visionary. He had the idea to move from downtown Denver to this, this army, closed army base. And clearly his vision drove the legislature to support this, the regions to support it, everybody to support it, except the faculty, by the way. Because he had a real bad habit of not communicating well with the faculty. He would send emails and fight with people on emails, and 5 people that was CC'd would become 100 people, and before you know it, there'd be this incredible undercurrent. So although he was a visionary, he really couldn't communicate well with people. Second person that I worked for was a psychiatrist, whoever sat in the back there, and it was a great listener. And he also loved the inside game. So he did the strategic planning, the financing, all the inside stuff to make everything work, and actually moved us to Fitzsimmons. I mean, he was the one that moved us to Fitzsimmons. Incredible talent also. Third guy I worked for was the best fundraiser I've ever worked for in my life. He raised all kinds of money for Mr. Anschutz, $110 million to name the campus and a bunch of other money. So my point is that if they came in a different order, this project wouldn't have occurred, okay? And the first guy, who was a visionary, I mean, he couldn't do operations or fundraising to save himself, and the other two couldn't do the other 2 roles either. So part of, it's interesting, but part of leadership is opportunity and happenstance, and being in the right place at the right time. I feel that with my personality and my skills, I was dropped into a situation that was the right place at the right time for who I am. 5 years from now, a different kind of leader is going to be needed for NeoMed. And 5 years before, my predecessor was an extraordinary leader. Added the School of Pharmacy, added the College of Graduate Studies, got the legislature to change all the things I mentioned before. I couldn't have done that. That's not my skill set. And I don't think she could, by her own admission, she couldn't have done what I did. So I think, all saying you stand on the shoulders of the people who came before you, and then they stand on your shoulders after. I think there's a lot to that. That sometimes we have to not look at things in, kind of all or none or isolated cubes. We take advantage. It's got to be a win-win. We got to take advantage of the situation and the person who's in that job. I feel so. Now the answer to your question. I feel incredibly fortunate and blessed, if you will, to be in this situation. I think that, to be very straightforward about it, I think half of it came from my experience at Fitzsimmons, and the other half came from the extraordinary team that I was working with. And without having the team or the experience I had, it probably wouldn't have happened. I wound up on the job in a very strange way. I didn't seek this job out. They came and looked for me. The search firm came. They called me 3 months in a row, and I said, I'm not leaving Colorado. And then finally I said, how do I get you off my back? And they said, well, come from an interview. And so I called my daughter, who was at Miami University in Oxford. And I said, you ever hear of UCOM, Jenna? She said, never heard of it, Dad. Hey, Dad, come out for the weekend. You'll have a great time, then you can drive over there and do the interview. I didn't know it was a 4.5-hour drive. So I went to visit Jenna and came for the interview and literally fell in love with the place in 2 hours. I can't explain it any better than that. I mean, it's not some calculated thing where you sit down and you kind of figure out that you fit here or something. I just fell in love with the place. It was it really struck a note. And it was the people around the table that made the difference. Because I really like the people. And I guess they like me. So.
Isn't Jay something? We are very fortunate, we Northeast Ohioans, that we're able to live right now through this time of so many authentic leaders in Northeast Ohio. And Jay is clearly one of those lesser known but truly impactful leaders. And Jay, I'm so fortunate that we are fortunate that Susan and I and Dory got to work with you. That was a great experience. And thank you for taking that position in Rootstown. We're truly blessed to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Nice
You're
to meet all of
welcome.
you. Yeah.
And before we say goodbye, I do want to make some, I want to pat some of my people on the back who are on my team. The team of Bill Marshall, Dory Lieber, and Phyllis Webb just completed a very complex, challenging search for the ASM International, the American Society for Materials International, which is they have the geodesic dome out on the far east side. They searched nationally for a new managing director, and the search committee was made up of PhD scientists, and the board is made up of PhD scientists, and it offers some very interesting challenges to work with people of that nature. They have challenging schedules, and they're located all over the world, so getting them all in one place at one time to interview candidates is truly, well, it's beyond human capability, but we pulled it off, or they did, their team did. And Susan, Zach, and Greg Reynolds, and Dory and Phyllis have been working on these amazing searches for Magnet, which is an economic development organization here in Cleveland oriented to manufacturing. And we are very blessed to be able to play that role in bringing great leaders into organizations in Northeast Ohio. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you in November. Do you want to say something, Greg?
Gee, thanks, Ralph. Just to fill you in on a couple of other great leaders that are going to be with us in the coming months. In November, Kirsten Bogan is passionate about STEM education. Ellen she's so passionate, rather, that she, as the third president and CEO of the Great Lakes Science Center, she put a STEM school in the Science Center. She's also created and launched Cleveland Creates, which is a strategic initiative developed with corporate leaders to change the community's narrative around advanced manufacturing and technology for diverse middle school youth and families. And she's going to be talking to us about that vision and sharing that vision with us on November 8th. And then, here's a quick quiz for you. Can anyone tell me what it's Just Lunch Blue Microphone, a company that provides microphones for the likes of Sting, The Boss, and Coldplay, and Area Wide Protective Services, a local national firm. You'll see AWP, personnel directing traffic when there's construction. Anybody tell me what they all have in common? An individual by the name of Stuart Cole. Stuart's the CEO of Riverside Company, and they are equity.
They're all owned by Stuart Cole's company.
He's amassed, as the co-CEO of Riverside Company, a portfolio of 80 great companies. He has a terrific team of professionals and leaders that he's brought on board over the years, and he's going to share his leadership style and what he looks for in talent. And that will be on January, I don't have the date here, guys, second Tuesday in January.
Thanks, Craig. And once again, another round of applause for Jay Gershen.